Got the world by the tail.
Their lives were good,
Everything just seemed perfect.
but that perfection concealed terrible secrets.
A woman like Virginia is never satisfied with just getting away with something. They have to keep getting away with something bigger and bigger.
He was doing just about everything wrong that you could think of.
A shocking murder revealed incest, drugs, and insatiable greed next on Snapped. Virginia Largellier grew up poor in a small town in Central Florida.
My mom was raised in Polk County, Florida. Polk County sits right in the middle of the state of Florida. It's a very rednecky, rural type of farming community almost. And from that social bracket, my mom escaped.
Despite her humble beginnings, she was a driven young woman. From an early age, she was determined to get everything she could out of life.
Virginia seemed to have an unusual drive to succeed, to achieve the things she wants, or to work towards whatever she saw as rewarding at the time.
But a strong work ethic wasn't the only weapon Virginia had in her arsenal.
Very sexy, very beautiful, very seductive. You know, could get anything she wanted as far as a man.
Virginia was described by a lot of people as loving and fun and carefree. She had this ability to kind of push people's buttons, and people seemed to want to do what she wanted them to.
And by the time she was in her 30s, Virginia had pushed a lot of buttons.
I believe she was married like 4 or 5 times.
Someone with these traits, she would meet a man and he may fulfill her needs at one moment, but when that person no longer fulfilled those needs, she would then move on to someone else that might.
But in 1985 in Edgewater, Florida, Virginia met the man who would change her life forever. He was a dentist named Norman Largellier. To Virginia, he was simply Mr. Right.
My mom and Dr. Norman Largellier met when I was in 5th grade, and they fell in love head over heels.
He had a reputation of being just very gentle, quiet. You could feel his compassion when he worked on you.
But it wasn't necessarily Norman's compassion that attracted Virginia.
He had a good practice. He was well known in the community. He was established. He had a lot of real property.
It would be normal that she would be attracted to someone like that.
And it was just as normal that he would fall for someone as outgoing and attractive as Virginia, even though he was married at the time.
He was very taken with my mom's beauty. A lot of people thought my mom was absolutely gorgeous. And it was fate.
And you can't fight fate.
Dr. Norman Largellier had to divorce his first wife, and then, they were divorced maybe a month, 2 months, and he turned around and married my mom.
As Mrs. Norman Largellier, life was good for Virginia. Not long after they were married, Norman even adopted Virginia's 2 children, Jason and Jessica.
He did love those kids. He did things for them. So, he had a really good aura.
Soon, Norman and Virginia were busy with more than just a happy family. They also became business partners in Norman's dental practice.
She brought the best out of Norman Largellier as it related to business. Norman had the professional ability to earn income, and Virginia had the ability to manage the income and build an estate for him and the family.
Every day they worked side by side in the dental office.
Norman was more concentrated on the medical practice. Virginia was concentrating on the business of the office.
She was a people person, and people come into the dental office, and a lot of people have anxieties when they go to the dentist, and I know that she would help smooth that over.
But working at the dental practice wasn't Virginia's only contribution to the Largellier family. In the early years of the marriage, Virginia gave birth to 2 sons. By 1991, the growing family not only had a thriving new office, they also had a 2-story mansion in DeLand with a pool and tennis courts and a luxury vacation home on Amory Island. Expensive cars, boats, even a private plane. Virginia's quest to escape her humble beginnings had taken her farther than she had ever imagined.
Virginia seemed to enjoy her job, her position, her money. She always dressed nice.
I know that Virginia had the best of everything. She even talked about her plastic surgeries that she had had, and And she wasn't, shy about it. Her clothing and jewelry was, the finest.
After years of loving him and leaving him, Virginia had finally settled down. But would it last? Not on your life. Or more specifically, not on Norman's. In the spring of 1991, Virginia and Norman Larzalier had been married almost 6 years. They were rich, healthy, and seemed to be happy. Life was good. Maybe too good.
We did what we wanted to. We went where we wanted to. We were planning on going to Australia. We had already been to the Virgin Islands. We were going to places like Circus World, Disney World. We were being a family. Everything just seemed perfect.
But all that changed one sunny lunch hour at Norman's dental office. It was exactly 1 p.m. on March 8th, 1991.
Norman Larzalier is in his office, and his wife is in the back room doing some paperwork. There's a few footsteps, but it's pretty quiet, and the shot rings out.
Hysterical, Virginia called 911.
911, what's the emergency? Give me an email. What's the problem, ma'am? Somebody just came in and shot my husband. Somebody what? Somebody just came in and shot my husband. All right, calm down, ma'am. I need your help. All right, calm down.
When the EMTs arrived on the scene, it was clear that nothing could be done. Dr. Norman Larzalier was dead. But why would someone want to kill the lovable dentist from DeLand? To answer that question, police would have to wade through a swamp of bizarre allegations, including kinky sex, incest, drug dealing, and murder. As paramedics removed Norman's body from the office, the widow Larzalier tearfully told police that Norman had no enemies, but that there was quite a bit of gold and Valium in the office safe. Plenty of reason to attract a burglar.
Virginia said the safe contained gold coins, some of her personal jewelry, and signed prescription slips for drugs.
We started looking at it more, maybe it was a robbery, and Dr. Larzalier maybe tried to stop him or recognize the person. And that's why he was dead.
But when the cops interviewed the office staff, they all claimed that nothing was missing. That's when things started to get weird. The dental hygienist who witnessed the shooting insisted that even though the gunman was completely masked and gloved, she recognized him. She claimed he was Virginia's son, Jason.
Emma said it looked just like Jason. She goes, I've known Jason since he was a little boy and watched him grow up.
In addition, a patient waiting to see the doctor swore that Norman called out Jason's name before he died. But when police asked Virginia to describe the man who shot her husband, she couldn't seem to make up her mind.
First he was short, then he was tall, he was Latin, he had a ponytail, it constantly changed. Honestly, at one point I expect to say it was the Kool-Aid Man.
If the shooter was Jason, then perhaps Virginia was covering for him. But why would Jason kill Dr. Larzalier in the first place? As they would soon discover, the Larzalier family was very complicated. And according to Jason, he was nowhere near the dental office when his father was murdered.
I was in Orlando, shopping at the mall. That day I was in the mall.
Police officially began the investigation by looking into the Larzalier dental practice. It became apparent that there was more going on there than filling cavities and cleaning teeth.
Virginia billed patients that never came in for dental work. She falsified records and charged for dental work that was never done. She wrote prescriptions and got drugs and sold drugs. She and Jason sold the drugs. She was doing just about everything wrong that she could think of.
And the more she got away with, the bolder she seemed to get. As part of the investigation, police unearthed Virginia's sexual history, a string of conquests that had not ended at the altar with Norman.
Through the investigation, we found she was just the type of woman that had to have men, different men.
We hear about men who do this to women, but women who do it to men usually have a sense that they want power, and that's probably the way she wanted to see herself, as somebody powerful, as somebody who had status.
Between the affairs and the drug dealing, the cops began to wonder where Virginia would stop.
A woman like Virginia is never satisfied with just getting away with something. They have to keep getting away with something bigger and bigger, and there's no telling how far someone like that could go.
But would she go all the way to murder? When the cops discovered that Virginia had taken out over $2 million in life insurance on her husband, they began to suspect the answer might be yes. Then, as the investigation worked its way into the Larzaliere home, the case took on another twist. It came when the police brought the Larzaliere's helper, Steve Heidel, in for questioning.
Stephen Heidel was someone that I had met in Orlando, and he just ingratiated himself. So it wasn't before too long that, sure, he was getting a weekly check for picking up dry cleaning, for doing whatever.
Heidel gave the police a crucial piece of evidence, the murder weapon.
We kept interviewing him. Finally, he ended up telling us that the shotgun they put in concrete, and Stephen Heidel drove up to Pelser Creek up near Jacksonville and threw the gun over, and we located the gun.
Heidel claimed he got rid of the gun at Jason and Virginia's request, but police noticed something very curious about Heidel. He was the exact same size as Jason.
Same build, same height, same stature, same everything.
When the cops interrogated the Larzaliere's housekeeper, Kristen Palmieri, she corroborated Steve Heidel's version of events. Faced with the threat of being arrested for murder, the two cut a deal with prosecutors.
They had guilty knowledge. They were the lesser of all evils. So we had to utilize them so we could get Virginia and Jason.
On May 5th, 1991, both Virginia and Jason were charged with first-degree murder in the death of Norman Larzaliere.
I heard that I was being looked at as a suspect when I heard that there was an arrest warrant out there with my name on it. And I turned myself in.
She surrendered, and in the state of Florida there is no bond, so she remained incarcerated until her trial.
The question was, did Virginia and Jason kill Norman, or had they been double-crossed by the help? Charged with murder one, Virginia Gail Larzaliere and her son Jason sat in the Volusia County Jail awaiting trial.
They took her out of BMW's, Mercedes, an estate home, and a very prosperous career, and put her in an 8x10 cell.
I don't think she liked the fact that she had to wear the prison clothes.
From day one, Virginia was confident she and Jason would beat the rap. She hired a big-ticket lawyer to plead her case, a case that would be centered on Steve Heidel.
There's no dispute in my mind that the police evidence will affirm who burglarized the business of Norman Larzaliere, and in the process of it, took the life of Norman Larzaliere. That is Stephen Heidel.
Mother and son would be tried separately. Virginia went first. On February 3rd, 1992, Virginia stood alone to face the capital charge of murdering her husband. If convicted, she could get the death penalty. Despite the high stakes, Virginia appeared confident, even arrogant, as she sat at the defense table.
Virginia at the trial was really cool as a cucumber. No remorse. Didn't see any tears shed, just seemed to be in pretty much control of herself.
The prosecution lost no time in laying out its case. Norman Larzaliere's murder was a cold and calculated scheme by Virginia to collect millions in insurance money.
My understanding is that there were about $2.5 million in policies taken out on him without his knowledge.
The state kicked off their case by introducing evidence of Virginia's numerous affairs. The defense successfully countered with proof that Norman not only knew about his wife's lovers, but accepted them.
My mother and father's relationship was very open. They had one couple that I know that they flew around with, and they flew and swung. I mean, that's what they did.
Our position was that at each time we could show something that didn't fit or wasn't true, that's what we would do. So basically it was an attack on the evidence, showing that that evidence didn't necessarily prove what the state would argue that it would prove.
But the prosecution pressed on. Each allegation was more sensational than the last, until finally they got to one that shook the entire courtroom.
One of the things that the state attempted to show during the course of the trial was that there was a sexual relationship that existed between Jason and Virginia.
My mother and I, we have a close relationship, and people have thought it was unnaturally close. I've described an inner circle of love before, and I mean, lots of people have said derogatory things about my mom, but I could never see it or feel it because just always been on that inner circle of love.
Jason took the role of the head of the household in the home, and was seen very close to his mom, kissing her in such a way that a son would not kiss a mother. It just wasn't natural.
The prosecution claimed that using sex to get what she wanted was a tried and true MO for Virginia, and she had used the ploy on her own son to get him to kill Norman.
He's right there in the house. She can control him emotionally and perhaps even sexually to do her bidding. Many times women will use sons in particular to carry out aggressive acts.
To put the finishing touch on their list of deviant behaviors, the prosecution called Steve Heidel to the stand.
Probably the most damaging of testimony against Virginia Larzalier came from this young man, Stephen Heidel.
Backed by Kristen Palmieri, Steve described how Virginia told him to get rid of the murder weapon.
Virginia gave them some uriatic acid to wipe the guns down so there would be no fingerprints. And Heidel found a plastic container of some sort, and they put the shotgun and the pistol in there and covered it up with cement and threw the block of cement under the water.
To back up their case, the prosecution brought in the block of cement they'd recovered and the X-ray that revealed its contents. But in cross-examination, the defense portrayed Steve and Kristen as nothing more than opportunistic con artists who changed their story every time they told it.
Kristen Palmieri and Stephen Heidel both gave, I believe, a total of 6 depositions, and in those 6 different depositions, their stories change.
His whole life was geared towards taking advantage of other people. He would target rich people. He was under investigation for bank fraud.
According to the defense, Norman's murder was for profit, but Steve Heidel was the one who benefited.
He tried to blackmail the Larzaliers. He tried to sell his story to the authorities. He tried to sell his story to national TV. And in the end, Heidel capitalized on every avenue of Norman Larzalier's death.
But whatever their role in the murder of Norman Larzalier, Steve and Kristen were protected by the immunity they received in return for their testimony. Closing arguments were made on February 24, 1992, and after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Looking as cocky as ever, Virginia stood to receive the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. So say we all, Daytona Beach, Florida, dated this 24th day of February, 1992.
I was in Volusia County Branch Jail awaiting my own trial when on WESH TV2 Daytona, flashing across the screen at the bottom, Virginia Larzalier has just been found guilty. I'll always remember that.
It was perhaps Virginia's arrogance and belief that she could control and manipulate these people that ultimately brought her down.
On March 14, 1992, by a narrow vote of 5-7, Virginia Gail Larzalier was sentenced to death for the murder of her husband.
Typically, women will be sobbing and feeling sorry for themselves, but what the jury saw was this haughty, arrogant attitude like, you know, I got one over on you and I'm going to get away with it again. And I think that's the ultimate thing that really got her the death sentence.
But in a separate criminal trial 7 months later, Jason Larzalier was acquitted of all charges. His attorney was able to create enough reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
I think Bill Lashley, which was his attorney, he threw enough doubt that it could have been this biker, it could have been, you know, the, I don't know, postman, it could be anybody but Jason, and they believed it.
I've been asked a lot of times, did I kill my dad? No, I did not. Was I in Edgewater the day of March 8th, 1991? No, I was not.
Despite her son's acquittal, Virginia Larzalier still sits on death row awaiting execution by the state of Florida. To her supporters, Virginia's conviction is a shocking injustice. To others, it begs an even more shocking question. Maybe she didn't do it for the money at all.
Perhaps Virginia, got excited or got some excitement in her life from some of these smaller rule-breaking situations, and each time she kind of upped the ante a little bit. It's kind of like, addiction to a drug. A little bit works at first, and then each time you need a little bit more to get that rush. The ultimate rush might be murder.